welcome to Have Mum, Have Baby, the virtual meetup. Today's chat is all about the burnout. For today, I've invited three amazing women, three mums, three doctors. It's not often I can say that, but please say hello to Stephanie Uy, Shruti Nathwani, and Punam Krishan. Hi, how are you?
Hello.
Hi.
Are you all well?
Yes, very good.
Good,
I feel like we're all in our own homes and it's nice and quiet, which is a good start.
A very good start. Yeah.
It's a big difference to what reality has been like recently.
I know that's the strange thing, isn't it? So for me, this is probably the second day of being at home without any of the kids. And it feels strange. And it feels like I am catching up almost on all of the things that I haven't been doing. So although you kind of feel like, actually that's not happened yet, because I feel like we're still kind of racing to do what we need to do. Yeah. And actually, Punam, you first of all messaged me about the burnout because you did something on This Morning, and I thought it would be great to have a bigger chat about that because it is something that's going to affect so many of us. And the last year has really impacted us all. And I know our experiences will be so different. We're all going through a pandemic, but our experiences of that pandemic are always going to be different. But a lot has been asked of us. So first of all, what is the burnout?
Yes, the burnout. So this was something actually that was on the rise before the pandemic even hit. And it's a sense of overwhelming exhaustion. And it comes from this 24/7 fast-paced life that we're all become accustomed to. And it's because everything is always coming at us a million miles an hour. And then lockdown hits, and parents, which is the kind of cohort that I've been seeing a lot of, and personally as a mum, I've been feeling it myself. The pressures have been unreal on me and my husband. But we have then had everything, every responsibility and some, where you've been looking after children. Many of us even gave birth during this lockdown. Steph and I had our second babies during this time. We were homeschooling. We were having to juggle the normal stuff, but everything else, plus with the external stressors. So it's no wonder that we were feeling not just physically exhausted, but that mental fatigue is real. And over time, what happens is it starts to build up and that pressure mounts, and ultimately you can get to a breaking point, which is what we want to prevent. And that's what we need to raise the awareness of, is that if you as a parent, as a mum at home, are finding that most mornings you're waking up and I always say, ask yourself two questions. How am I feeling today? What are my energy levels like? And if you're consistently finding that you're saying that you're tired, you're exhausted, you're fed up, you feel sad, you can't be bothered, you're not interested in things, or most worrying of all, that you're feeling that there's a bit of a lack of connection between you and your child, then these are all really serious symptoms and mustn't be ignored. And you really need to reach out for help. And you're not alone if you're feeling that way as well.
It's so interesting, isn't it, that you said before this, we were all having conversations about the struggle and the juggle, you know, that thing of there's so much to do as a parent, and you constantly feel like you're juggling, you constantly feel like you're not giving anything 100%. And that has just been magnified massively in the last 12 months. Stephanie, are you seeing an increase of people coming to talk to you about it?
So I'm still on maternity leave, so I haven't quite gone back to work just yet. It's and what a maternity leave it has been. But certainly on Instagram, you know, conversations with other people and friends as well who've got children at home. I think, we're all feeling very similar. So all of those emotions that Poon has described and you've described. And I think that it's just been a really unique time. And I don't think, you know, COVID has been so far reaching, and I don't think anyone has, any single parent or any parent at all hasn't been affected by it. Whether you've had a newborn like us and you've kind of been doing that juggle, whether it's your first baby or second baby or third baby, and then if you add things like homeschooling on top of all of that, I think we've all certainly found it really, really tricky. And you're right, even before all of this, that was happening already. I think that society, maybe we feel a lot of pressure from society, you know, and it starts from maybe from when you first have your baby, or even that kind of during pregnancy. There's this image of what pregnancy is meant to be like, this kind of lovely, glowy, amazing time. But we know that people can have lots of lovely symptoms to have to deal with, and you can feel really exhausted. And then you have your baby, you're in that newborn period, and it is just such a blur. And whilst it's beautiful and you've got this kind of new squidgy bundle, at the same time, there is that pressure that is within society and that we put upon us to kind of get back to normal straight away. And you just think, given what you've been through in terms of pregnancy and actually having the baby, that's a lot. And actually, Punam and I were talking about this recently and saying how in our cultures, and Shruti, you're probably very similar, in our cultures, there is this period after the baby arrives where it's a confinement period. So that's what we call it anyway in Chinese culture, where you are not meant to leave the house for like 30 or 40 days. Your family comes to you, helps you with the baby. Mum or someone else is usually like cooking you delicious, like nutritious food, and they're all just kind of supporting you in this bubble. And I was saying, like, I used to think it was a bit old-fashioned, to be honest, and kind of push back against it. I was like, Mum, I'm not doing that. What do you mean not leaving the house? And I left the house, but I could see that there was kind of so much value in that, because you've got that support. And I guess that's what we've all been lacking during this time, is that lack of support and help.
I guess in terms of newborn, I've kind of wondered if there are two sides to it, because I think in normal times there is that pressure of doing a lot, seeing people, having people over, and on the one hand it's horrible not to have that support, but on the other hand, how great that you don't have those people interrupting while you try to get into your groove. So although it's kicked up loads of negative things as well, there've got to be some positives within that, of you just being able to spend time with your baby and really get to know them. Because I always found that whenever there was anyone else in the room, I'd get mum sweats really bad. I'd get panicky. I'm being a bad mum because I don't know why he's crying, and actually it eases things off, I think, when you don't feel like you're under a magnifying glass.
Yeah. Absolutely. Actually, I really connect with that. And that I think it was just such a bittersweet time going through those first few weeks, because especially coming from a culture where the family just swoons in, there's a lot of like, I really miss my mum so much, even though she was just 10 minutes down the road. And I think one of the most painful things that you've ever had to do is to actually wave from a window to somebody that you want and need more. Like I think when you become a mum, you forget actually you really need your own mum and you want somebody to really take care of you. But then having those kind of quiet times where you didn't have to get out of your minging pajamas, like for anybody, you could just sit in that. It was nice also. And we got to, my son immediately, it was the peak of the first wave. So it was lockdown and homeschooling was starting. And actually the positives was that my son got to spend time with his little sister in a way that we would never have otherwise had. So yes, there was lots of positives, but I think it kind of boiled down to, I wish there was a choice.
Yeah.
And I think because there was no choice, it felt more painful. And I think moving forward, yes, I think that we should encourage that it's okay if mum wants some space in those first few weeks, that's okay. But I think just knowing that your loved ones have that chat, so that, if I do need you, I'll reach out for you, or there's other things that you can do to support me and help me. But I think that the choice was taken away, which was a bit difficult to come to terms with.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things with burnout, is that you have to preserve your boundaries. And you have to pick and choose, am I going to want to interact with this person? Is that a negative or a positive feeling? So when you talk about your mum, that's a comfort, that's someone that you want near you. And actually that's someone who's going to hold your baby and give you some peace. You know that straight away. And I think we talk about the fact that burnout was there before lockdown, and now it's rife. And our emotional, physical and our mental reserves have really been tapped into. And I always speak to, the parents that come into my A&E, pediatric A&E, and the parents on my social media platform. And I talk about strength and where do you get that strength from? And how do you do what you do every single day, but you just keep going? And it's a matter of saying, actually, I can't keep going in this moment. I need to go. I remember when I had Jason, I remember saying to my I need to go. I need to just leave this building, and I need to just be away. And it's about preserving who you are as a person and mentally just pressing refresh. And during lockdown, I think pressing refresh has been harder for people. How do you get away? Where do you go? What do you do? And so it's about finding, quiet 10 minutes somewhere, whether it's in another room, and just changing your mental space. And it's hard. I think it's really challenging.
Well, it's really hard for any mum, I think, to say, I am struggling, because you are the one. It always feels like everything falls onto you, and you put yourself at the bottom of the, of the list of things to be done, whatever it is. And it's hard, especially when, you know that there are so many people out there who would long to have kids, who look at you and kind of go, you're a parent, and it's that hard thing of kind of going, I'm really trying, but I am depleted, and my head is foggy, and I need to step away. I feel like it's always you're into like the guilt and everything that is so layered, and you're constantly feeling conflicted with your emotions. So it's hard to kind of say, hold on a minute, I'm not doing great, and I need a bit of time.
Yeah, I think that one of the messages that's so kind of been really down the centuries, generations, is that this concept of what's strong, like Shruti just mentioned, what strong looks like. And we have captions, it's strong like a mother. And we are the epitome of strength. But I think that one thing that my own personal experience several years ago, when I suffered from postnatal depression, and it took me such a long time to call for help and to acknowledge that actually I was struggling and that I needed to speak to someone. But when I took that first step, and actually for the first time stepping into the shoes of a vulnerable person and owning it, that I recognized that actually next to the word strong, vulnerable needs to coexist. Because actually when we own that and we say that I'm feeling a little bit down, I'm struggling a little bit, that actually is a huge sign of strength. And I say that so much to my mums now at the postnatal checks, particularly this year, is tell me how you're feeling, tell me how your birth was. And it's absolutely okay if you want to have a cry, to give them that opportunity and space to say, you're not being judged, you're not a bad mum, you're no less strong. Actually, I think you're so brave for saying that it's hard, because it is hard. Like, none of this is easy. It doesn't mean that it's taken away from the job that we have to do. We love it, but there is no, like any other job, you can't just take a day off from your kids. You can't just, call in for some annual leave or take a sick day. You have to get up in the morning, and no matter how much, most of us will have done that. I've done it so much, the tears, my goodness, a roller coaster throughout this year. Like, one minute I'm laughing, the next minute I'm crying, and I'm like, I can't even keep up with this. But then you see your babies and you're like, oh my God, I love you, you're amazing, you're everything I want. And then the next minute you're like, I just need that chocolate because I'm not quite coping. And it's all part of the normal spectrum. This is motherhood. And I think the more we normalize this, the better it is, because then we can take away that pressure, that sense of guilt, that sense of I'm bad because I'm having to do X, Y, and Z to kind of comfort myself. But actually, Mum, you need to hold yourself too.
Yeah.
I think you three are in a very unique position as doctors, because you must find it sometimes where when you ask a mum if she's okay, it's that the barriers are still up. Yes, I want to be, I'm presenting what I want to be. But at the same time, for me personally, when a doctor asks if I'm okay, I'm just a bit like, everything comes out, all the emotion spills. And, I think even one of you asked the other day, how are you? And I definitely overshared on the how are you, because I was like, I don't know what it is. You just kind of, you're in that trusted position. So are you able to spot, I guess, when a mum is kind of trying to put on a front and say, I'm okay? And does it surprise you still when a woman kind of goes, blah, blah, blah?
I think what Punam just described specifically there was the fact that if you've been there yourself, so we've all struggled, we've all really found it tough. Just because I'm a paediatrician does not mean that motherhood was easy for me. In fact, I think it was expected that I just would know everything and I wouldn't need more support, but it wasn't like that. I couldn't doctor my own child. I needed doctors to do that for me. So now, when I've got those mums coming into paediatric A&E, I do take a little bit more time with them. And I do kind of say, I give them the eyes, like, I've been there. The empathy is there. And I say, are you really okay? And just so you know, I felt a bit like this too when I was going through it. You're not alone. And in that moment, it's like something's been lifted from their shoulders. And they look at me and they're like, they let it all out. And they just say, oh God, I just thought I was really doing a bad job and I'm not good at this. And you feel like you want to lighten their load because you've been there when your load has been so heavy and you've needed someone to really just do that for you.
Yeah, it's that foundation, isn't it? And I think that's kind of what we're all searching for in a way. And the thing is that there are hundreds of different emotions that you can feel throughout the day. But I remember someone saying to me once, what you feel is not unique. You know, if you have felt something, the likelihood is that hundreds, thousands of other mums have felt exactly the same way. And I think sometimes it's just being given permission, isn't it, to say that. And I think that certainly the difference that I've noticed between first and second babies, that first baby, I was very much like, if people said, you look like you're doing so well, obviously that's a lovely thing to say. People really mean it well, but in the same way, you kind of also feel like, oh, well, maybe I can't say that I'm finding it a little bit difficult as well. Whereas second time round, I'm like completely overshare. I'm like, oh, and isn't this awful? And it's really difficult. And, you know, you find these moments that you can connect with. And that's so liberating, because you realize actually everyone really is going through the same thing. And I think that's why sharing like that, you know, all of us, we've connected through sharing all of these experiences together. That's why this community of yours as well exists, is because everyone is in the same boats. And I think it's so nice to be able to go somewhere where, you know, someone will put their hand up and say, yeah, me too.
I think I've always said the best thing you can give to a new mum is honesty. Whatever, you know, that feeling. I've literally had it before where I've seen a friend for 2 minutes. I had to get into a taxi that was going, she was going somewhere. We had 2 minutes together. In that time, we massively overshared. There was suspected prolapse chat, all sorts within 2 minutes. And then blah, 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 blah. And then when you get in the car, you're like, what just happened? It's like a whirlwind of trying to go blah. And obviously the other thing that's happening at the moment is we don't have those support networks, and we don't have those baby groups and things like that to go to in the same way that we did before. And for me, a huge part of that, because it was never really about the bond between me and the baby within those lessons. And I think as soon as I realized that, I enjoyed them a lot more, because the pressure was off. It was about sitting down next to another mum, just going, I've not slept, you know, or I'm feeling a bit frazzled. You know, it's having those shared experiences. So I guess now it's about finding those places where you can have that outlet and be reassured.
Yeah.
And it's also about finding those safe spaces. So we have social media, which is brilliant. Look at us all here together. We all feel the same. The minute we share our moments of truth, our honesty, immediately all the women around us that have felt that in that moment, their confidence levels goes like that. But equally with social media, you will find, oh, how does that baby look so well dressed? And I have all these clothes and I can't even get them onto my kid. And so how do you help women and mothers find that balance between taking something really positive from the space and leaving all that negativity behind? And I think that's what you're doing, Chyi, which is absolutely brilliant.
It's hard, isn't it? Because I think as soon as you see something, you can't, you don't take it for what it is. And that is a snapshot. You don't know how long it took that mum to get into that perfect outfit with her little ones. You don't know what the mechanics are behind it, how everyone's feeling. And it is difficult because you can't help but compare to what everyone else is doing. And even, you know, during this whole thing, when at times I think I have felt like, oh, lockdown has taught me patience. And then other times I'm just not patient in the slightest. And I think in the last year, we've had to, as much as possible, accept so much of ourselves, and we've been pushed to such extremities that, you know that I finished days, you know, where everything's kind of gone wrong, and just thought, I don't want to be that mum, but that's the mum that I was that day. And you've kind of got to draw a line under it and move forward and know that you're never going to be the perfect mum that exists in the movies. You know, you're always going to have your flaws. And I guess what's difficult is that during this pressurized time, we've had to allow ourselves to also be feeling it, to be there for our kids and as much as possible, but also know that our feelings of it, because there was a time where I definitely at the beginning was like, I know this is hard. I know I miss my family, but we have a nice house. We have a garden. We don't have to worry about putting our food on the table. So therefore, I can't moan. I can't find this tough because there are other people that are finding this so much harder. And like you say, it's about allowing yourself to validate your feelings. We're all going through a global pandemic and we're all missing things and having to adapt our lives. And it's just allowing ourselves to kind of go, you're okay. Like, it's okay to feel the way that you are.
Yeah.
being compassionate within your own mind. Sorry, Punam. And, just saying, I don't know why we find it so difficult to be kind to ourselves. I think that is such an interesting aspect for me. And especially as medical professionals, we're out there, we're giving everyone the sort of time they need. We're listening to them. We're giving them empathy and, all the reassuring words that they need to hear. But we can't do that for ourselves. And I think all mums struggle with that inner critic and that negativity. And when you become a mum, you feel really vulnerable, and you're, anyone can say anything to you and the words really get to you. You can feel them. And so you've got to be your own best friend. And why shouldn't you be in a time which is so challenging? Sorry, Punam, go ahead.
No, I absolutely agree with that. I think the validation point is just such an important one, because we've so been raised to kind of seek external validation all our lives. Even as sort of academics, it's always been, what grades, always striving to be the top and the best and everything. And then you kind of find yourself in social media. And as a mum, I remember it clearly, I'd have days where I thought I'd done okay, and then you'd go onto social media and then just feel crap all of a sudden. And you'd be like, why has that happened? And I remember like my mum at the very beginning when my son was born, and it was just the most incredible words, because I was walking around expecting my child to behave like the textbooks, because, we're scientists. The baby will sleep at 7 and we'll dream feed at 11 and do all the stuff. And my mum was like, your baby, read your baby. You're getting stressed out over these books and these manuals, but why don't you just read him? And actually through this pandemic, the thing that's been the most validating has been on the days where I have not seen that I homeschooled, that I managed to get my baby okay, that I managed to get dinner on the table for them. I'd still be like, I could have done X, Y, and Z. And we do this lovely practice. We've done it for years in our house, where we do gratitude at the end of the day. So like my husband will sit down and say 3 things that went really well that day. And every day the validation I needed was my son, because there was days where I was teary and he's like, Mummy, what's wrong? And I was like, I just felt like I should have done this and I didn't quite, get, Mummy, you're perfect. Yeah. And what, that's like a million hearts that you would want in a second. That's like a viral post right there hitting you right in the gut. And still, we don't seek the validation from the ones that actually are the people that tell us what a great job we're doing, because they smile back at us. And I think that with my patients particularly, giving them that empathy, giving them that space, but also empowering them that they can speak to their doctor. I know that we don't always get the same experience, and many of us, we weren't taught. You don't get taught, how to look after mums at medical school. You get taught about the anatomy, physiology, and all that jazz, and then suddenly you find yourself on the other side of the consultation table, and you're feeling quite vulnerable. And I think that every practice that we do have GPs that have got interest in women's health that do tend to do the baby checks, and I think it's empowering women to say that is your confidential safe space. That you can ask for a doctor, and if you don't get the answer, then you can ask for a second opinion. But if you are finding that the thoughts that you're having are negative, are kind of giving you feelings of hopelessness, or that you're feeling sad more days than none, that you can't find the joy in every day, then you cannot let that go on, because we all know that if mum is well, happy mummy equals a happy baby, and the mum is at the core of the family unit. So we really need to prioritise and move in a way, and particularly right now, is raise more awareness that mums are struggling more than they're coming forward. Especially at the beginning of this lockdown, lots of people were afraid to go to the doctor. They didn't want to waste time. They were worried about being a burden on the NHS. They thought their problems weren't important. Everything is important. Mental health is so important. Mums are vital.
Well, one of the things that kind of pushes us forward with Happy Mum Have a Baby is that statistic that the leading cause of death in new mums is suicide. And you kind of think, with everything going on, how is that amplified? How is that becoming even more of a worry, that when we don't have the space to look after our own mental health? We talk about self-love and self-care, but it has been really hard to find those moments where you can take them. So how do we look at self-care in a way that it doesn't have to be an hour out and doing something that's when our time is limited and our resources are limited? How do we approach it?
I actually recently had a talk with myself about that, because I used to think, when you exercise, we've talked about exercising recently, Chyi, and about doing, running and doing trying to do a 5K and getting that number. But I I've recently said to myself, why does exercise have to be like a good 45 minutes? Why can't it just be that 15 minutes? And if that means that I do it every day versus doing 45 minutes twice a day, it's so much better for me. And the same thing applies to self-care. I didn't really know what self-care meant. I thought, it's like a spa day, or I have to really go and do something, but you don't. It can be something as simple as like the process of doing a skincare regime. We've all been trying to do those recently. And it's, I think Steph, you put one up, you said 6 minutes. 6 minutes where you are in your bathroom, there's no child running around you, and you just, you do it, you put some nice music on in the background, and you put the lotions on, and you just space out a bit. And that's self-care, and that you can put that into your routine, and it's just, 6 minutes. Steph, you can tell us more about that now.
Yeah, I love my skincare routine, and it's something that, again, I kind of loved pre-kids. And I remember, wedding run up, you have all your kind of, fancy things that you're doing, but after kids, you kind of forget about it. And I think that is an example of something that I love and enjoy. And I think what your self-care is will look different to others. So I think it's kind of just honing in on those things that actually you just love doing, even if it's like a little kind of guilty pleasure, just allowing yourself to do that, and just taking 5-10 minutes of the day, because yes, in an ideal world, we would take longer, and I'd love to kind of go for a haircut and a spa day, but also realistically, we can't do that at the moment. So being able to squeeze in those 10 minutes just for you, I think is really important. I think what's interesting is that on social media, there's a lot of talk about this isn't self-care. People talk about managing to kind of go to the toilet by yourself. They're like, this is not self-care, that's just basic
self-respect.
Yes, exactly. And so I do get that as well. I think it's something that, for me, to self-care to me, something like a little bit treaty, and something that makes me feel better. And certainly getting out, doing exercise, just a bit of movement. We're not saying you've got to go and run, like you said, like long distances, but getting out in that fresh air as well. Again, in the kind of peaks of lockdown where you could only go out for limited times of the day, I think we all realize just how valuable being able to get out in the fresh air is. So just taking
that kind of helps as a family as well, because I felt that there have definitely been times for us where it's all just a bit heavy. We're all just, there's fighting going on, I'm refereeing, it's not fun. And actually just going out and walking in a field and everyone just running along, the energy instantly changes. So it's something, and as much as I try not to have, I've told myself that used to be my me time, is us out as a family. And I've realized that is not me time. That is definitely me as a mum time. But, that feeling of that, it's almost a bit of, it's freeing. Everyone feels that they are out of that space. They're in the open air. And there is something very different about that, rather than just staying in.
Well, if you use up that sort of physical energy, there's less left for the emotional energy. And I find that, there were those 2 weeks where we couldn't leave our flat and we were all driving each other insane. And you had to create, I live in a 2-bedroom flat, and you had to create pockets of space within this flat and go and find an area where you could just have peace. And I remember saying to my other half, I'm just going to go to the bedroom for 10 minutes. Can you just, take care of things just for 10 minutes? And he would do it, and we would keep switching in and out. And you have to lean on your partner during times like this. And even if you think that, I don't know what's going to happen in those 10 minutes with Jason, and what's going to happen with is he going to take care of him? It doesn't matter. You've got to just really leave it behind, go into the other space that you want to go into, and just say, it's okay, I'll come back in 10 minutes, and you'll feel slightly better. And it is about defining boundaries, leaning on people that you can lean on within your own household, and then making the spaces, the pocket spaces that you can, in such, I guess what we're saying is a limited situation that we're in at the moment.
Yeah, that's really important. And it's important just to remember, whilst we've had the lockdowns, moving forward, coming out of this, burnout is a forever thing, and self-care needs to be something that's actually taught to us. I think we need to relearn what self-care looks like, and particularly as mums, I don't think this conversation is actually had. Even in, if you're a first-time mum, you expect it to look like the magazines. You don't really have those conversations of what it's really going to look like. And I remember when I was, pregnant for the first time, and towards the end, I was still trying to do things, nesting, busy, busy, busy. I remember some mums, friends saying, you really want to rest now because, you know, you won't get that right. And you don't believe it, but actually having those honest conversations and learning that self-care is an everyday thing. It's learning to actually put the same love into the meals that you cook for your families and do it for yourself too. Don't just wait and have the cold food. Don't just wait to have the ends of whatever's left in your kids' plates. And actually physically, yes, try and see if you can get out for the walks. And with families, for me as well, that looks like pretty much with the children, or when they go to bed, take the dog out for a walk, and that's a lovely bit of quiet time. But throughout the day, you know, taking moments to look after your mental well-being. And if that's a 5-minute quiet time, if that's a call to your best friend or to a loved one, and just kind of having a chit chat about nothing, if it's Netflix for an hour of just mindless watching, you know, all of that counts. It doesn't need to be that you need to be doing those HIIT workouts that you're seeing on social media and eating those big fancy green salad. Like, it's just about finding balance, keeping it real, and accepting that for a short period of time it might just be little bursts here and there. And when you do, because we all look forward to the holidays, but what I find is people go until they get to the holiday. And then they go, I always get sick on holiday. I'm always ill. And it's because you're so run down. And we need to get to the point of prevention rather than always being reactive and trying to cure a problem. And I think this is where it is as a society. We need to open up, especially those, you know, sometimes there will be criticism of parental burnout. Oh, like, I mean, you're a mum. That's just part of the thing. It's not part of your thing to become ill. Like, we didn't sign up for that. We need to be healthy.
And we're all trying to balance so much. And like I was saying before, it's that thing of, so me and Tom have been in the bad habit for a long time of working in the evenings. That has obviously been pushed further because we've been with the kids all day and then working. So we literally probably come together about 11 o'clock each night to watch an episode of This Is Us. We have a little cry, then get to bed by midnight. And then one of the kids, well, it's a game of, you know, people, musical beds, and someone will be up at 6, you know, so we know that we're not giving each other enough sleep. We know that we're not doing what we should. And I think it was a bad habit before. It's got even worse now. And I wonder, moving forward, for everyone else who's kind of allowed their work life to be pushed into the evening, at what point can we claw back? And is that going to be something that we've got to look out for? You know, making sure that we have that switch off point. You know, we have to lower our expectations of what we do.
I don't know if it's actually helped you, Chyi. We've been back to school now for 3 weeks here in Scotland, and immediately the transition of that in terms of what the routine became again, you know, because throughout lockdown, routines just went out the window. You know, kids were getting up, early. It's always early. They never get up late. But in terms of when you actually started the day, it massively varied. And if you're working as well, there was huge overlaps. There's the stress of trying to deliver schoolwork, and then the incessant need for snacking. And, you know, there was just no timing. Whereas, you know, since my son's gone back to school, we've got that drop off by 8:30, and then the baby started nursery, and suddenly the dynamics of the day change and you get a bit of rhythm back. You have bedtime, which is more orchestrated than what it was. And I think that that's really important, you know, wherever possible. If you have a routine and a plan for the next day ahead, it really helps to steer the way, and it takes that extra mental load. As mums, we're not just managing the task at hand. There's always like a million people in the back of your mind kind of operating various different departments, and you're always on micro-tasking as well, and all of that plays into it. So if you can take that away in some way, whether that's by meal prepping at the beginning and sticking to a routine during the day, having those bedtimes, you know, nailed, which who does? I don't like those mums that have it nailed. But, you know, having some sort of structure really makes a big difference.
I always find organising makes me feel better. It makes me feel calmer. So tonight, even before the kids come home, I'll have their uniforms ready for tomorrow, because then I know that is my job done. Yeah. And tomorrow I'll help them get into them. But that's just one less thing to worry about. It takes a few minutes off of tomorrow morning because we've got to get everyone out by 8. Which is a very different feeling as well, actually. So whereas before we had that 2 or 3 hours before school started on the laptops or whatever, now everyone needs to be dressed, fed and out by 8. You know, it's a very different energy again. And I feel like we've all been so tightly wound for so long that it's going to take a while for us to kind of go,
yeah. I think
you come home and you're just like, what do I do? And then you have the coffee and then you're like, I should be doing something. And it's like, I'm still not really quite giving myself that permission to just go, it's okay, sit down and have it hot. You're allowed to.
I think, Chyi, what you said about lowering expectations is so important as well, because it's that temptation, isn't it, when they're kind of at nursery, or my little one, she's recently started doing a few mornings. I don't think you don't appreciate that time, do you, until you get back and you're like, okay. But then immediately my thought is, well, I need to whiz around the house, get X, Y, and Z done. Because we're just used to that kind of hamster wheel, I guess, of just go, go, go. But giving yourself that time to say, it's okay, I don't have to do all of that now. That will always be there. I'm never going to have done everything that I want to do on this like never ending list. So being able to kind of take a step back from that, I think is really valuable. But also, easier said than done. But I think it's like, just as we were tried to get used to lockdown, same thing, we're coming out of lockdown, and like you said, it's going to be a period of transition as well.
Yeah.
Do you think that will bring up further anxiety?
Absolutely. I did a recent post where I kind of sat myself down and asked myself how I was feeling first before I then put advice for others on Instagram. And one of the things I noticed was that the more I was kind of engaging in sort of conversations with people, maybe even on the phone or just talking more to friends, I was feeling sort of anxious, and I was thinking, oh, am I saying the right thing? Am I behaving in the right way? And all of a sudden I'm thinking, I'm quite an outgoing person. What is this strange feeling? And it's social anxiety. We've been in our little bubbles, and they have been quite pleasant at times. You don't have to worry about anyone else around you. And now we're being put back into the world, and it will take time to adjust. You might not feel entirely comfortable. You haven't maybe been, I talked about financial security, and, you may not have been spending as much money, and all of a sudden you feel the pressure to, I can go out, so I should go out and I should pay for this. And you may not want to. So it's about deciding, this is the time to realize what your priorities are, and you can change them. And that's what I think lockdown has allowed a lot of us to gain as perspective and say, actually, I didn't really like going to meet all those parents all the time. I kind of like those weekends where it's maybe just 3 or 4 of us and we do our own thing. And so figure out what is right for your family, and just take your time easing yourself back into, I guess, normality. What is that? Who even knows anymore? Just create what's normal for your family and what suits you.
And it's confusing, isn't it? Because for so many of us, our children will be back at school or nursery. So there is that feeling of, well, it's back to normal now, but it's not. And it's that feeling of a cloudy head, of feeling anxious, feeling your chest go, but not really knowing why. And it just conflicts with everything that's going on. But it's overwhelming, I think.
It really is. Interestingly, as soon as the lockdown restriction easing was announced, the next day in surgery, we had several patients calling up, just feeling really anxious. And it was interesting because in the media we were hearing wonderful countdown, so many days left until freedom. But actually change has been something that, we have it in life, but never at the magnitude and intensity and pace that we've had it in this last year. We've all been glued every day, kind of thinking, what's happening today? What's happening now? And suddenly, again, the whole world seems turned upside down as we prepare for returning back to normality, which is altered. So much has happened to people in this last year, whether there's been new members of the family coming in, whether we've lost loved ones, financial changes, job changes, so many dynamics have happened, and coming back into this new altered sense of normality is going to be tough. Back to school has evoked a lot of anxiety amongst parents. We have this huge awareness of infection control in a way that we've never had before. So understandably, it's going to take time, and it's probably remembering to speak to people with kindness and meeting people where they're at. If you're excited and you want to make plans and you want to rush out to the shops, then that's absolutely okay. But if you speak to someone and they're not quite ready yet, don't put pressure on them, and accept that that's absolutely fine too. Maybe they won't want to do play dates yet. That's okay. There's other things that we can do. We have tapped into other ways of connecting with people. So maybe for a little bit longer, some people need to do that. And that's perfectly okay. And I think we just need to really normalize that conversation, because we're going to see it a lot over the coming months.
Well, it's like you said before as well earlier, it's that thing of the choice has been taken away. So our children are at school, but I've not seen my mum and my dad.
Yeah.
And I don't know, and they don't live locally. So it's not like when those lifts start happening, it's going to be further down the line, and that is still months away. So I guess it makes sense that it's not all happy. It's still confusing. There's still so much, and that feeling of, because for me, I've been less productive than I normally would in terms of writing and everything like that feeling of knowing that I have to go back, that I have to raise my game again and get the job done. There is that feeling of anxiety,
But burnout, it doesn't just go away. It's not like, we had burnout before lockdown, we've got it. Lots of us have got it even worse during lockdown, but it's not just going to go away because restrictions are lifted. So you have to address that directly. We say emotional exhaustion. You can't just expect to function at 100% back into society because we're now allowed to mix with other people. You can't expect that from yourself. And that's what, you're saying, Chyi, like you feel the pressure to go and do all that work that you weren't able to do. And that's where kindness comes into the picture. We have to say, no, I need to stop, refresh, relax. When I'm ready, I'll do it. And when I'm ready, I'll be more productive because I have refreshed. So if you haven't had, and I talk to everyone about having a break because, holidays have been taken. The minute the first lockdown happened, I got an email from Great Ormond Street Hospital saying, your annual leave does not exist. And I thought straight away, oh my God, my annual leave. And it wasn't that, we were even able to go on holiday during that annual leave. It was my annual leave. I need to just stop and pause from work. Like, what do you do? And, we take those breaks for granted. The pause where you say, you don't have to achieve this much in this day in this amount of time. You can just go for that walk, which never ends, or you don't have to have those expectations of yourself. And I think being kind, easing yourself back into it, and actually saying, though restrictions have lifted, this is still not normal for me anymore.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting as well, Chyi, when you said there that you feel that you've not been as productive and that when we're going to be back in, you need to up your game. Now, what all of us have done, and I think we've all been watching each other, like we've been working pretty much non-stop though, because this online existence means there's no boundaries. You don't have a 9 a.m. and a 5 p.m. clock off. You're working into the evenings, at the weekends, and it's, as Shruti said, it's all been without any annual leave. We've actually had no switch off downtime time at all this past year, yet the coming out of this means that we need to up our game, and therein lies the problem, which is we are not going to be able to prevent burnout unless we just say no. Like, I have actually performed at the best of abilities that I could. I've achieved all that I could, and I've kept my family surviving and thriving during this period. That was amazing. And taking it one day at a time, and it's easier said than done because I think we all do. We're all just like, right, what does this mean? Where are we going next? And we're all trying to plan for the next few months. But actually just bringing it back to, okay, we are where we are. Things are very changeable at the moment. So let's get through today and wake up again tomorrow and do our best. And I think that the lockdown has, for many people, it certainly has for me. I used to be somebody who used to really worry about yesterday, worry about the future, but it's brought me very much into the present moment. And I hope that we carry this forward of just trying to be a bit more in the day and celebrating the successes and the wins of the day, and then dealing with whatever comes tomorrow, being as organised as we can, but not stressing too much and magnifying it into this mountain of work, because the more connected we become, which is only going to be a problem that's going to continue, the more susceptibility we have to this fatigue that has far greater impacts on our physical and mental health.
We talk about burnout leading to depression, and the difference between depression and burnout is that when you do have a break from whatever the stresses are, that emotional exhaustion, you can set back time, and you can start that clock fresh, and you can feel better. But with depression, that may not happen. And so I guess, Punam, what you're saying that's so important is that take care of yourself now, because we don't know where these feelings are going, and we have to check in with ourselves every day when you wake up, look into the mirror and say, am I okay or am I not okay today? And then go from there with your day.
I think another really important point is, everything we've been talking about is so important for us to do, like the self-care, kind of checking in, giving yourself boundaries, but it's also it's so great that awareness is being raised so that other people know when to spot it as well, because sometimes as we've all mentioned, it's really difficult to kind of sometimes put your hand up and say, look, I'm struggling. And I sometimes think that maybe even as healthcare professionals as well, that might be another added layer to it, because you feel like, oh well, we're the ones that should be giving out the advice, and finding yourself on the other side of that consultation desk is can feel a bit uncomfortable sometimes. And so I think if people around you, if you know new mums or new parents, knowing to check in on them and knowing how to spot the signs and kind of actually being able to sit them down, take them away from all of the external distractions and just saying, look, are you okay? And kind of asking it a few times as well is also really important.
And not just within those first few weeks. I think so easily with when people have newborns, you can check in then, but it's like it's essentially the same as lockdown. It's the fact that it is your new normal and life is so overwhelming and different. I think it's important to check in sort of all the time, really.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that especially those of us that are kind of have been there, I think that raising that awareness or creating these communities, which all of us have done, and it's lovely, it's just kind of that ripple effect once you can kind of give to another mum and just to check in, or I've had mum friends that have just dropped off flowers outside the door, or have left cake, and those little things means so much. So it doesn't need to be that you have to kind of keep being, how are you? I'm just phoning in again and just checking, are you all right? But there's lots of ways that we can let mums know that we're there for each other, and it's all about the solidarity, isn't it? It's a very uniting experience, and I think that the more authentic and honest that we can be, I think that's where the conversations are starting to change. And certainly over the years we've seen a big shift in just mums being raw, and I love that. And that's what we see in sort of GP land, certainly when we're doing our postnatals, is that we do see the raw, and we wish that we saw it more, and that mums felt that they could have that safe space and not just feel that if they come in that we're going to judge them, because there's no such thing. We're there to help, and sometimes that may be just a shoulder to cry on, which is what the GP is. We are that constant in the community. We're there from when a mum tells us that she's pregnant, and we're there right until holding granny and grandpa's hands, at the end of life. We are that continuity. But I think to know that sometimes just that shoulder to cry on, that's absolutely fine. That is therapy. Sometimes it may take the form of a pill. And if you need that short term, there's no judgment and no stigma to that. That's absolutely okay. Sometimes it might be cognitive behavioral therapy or talking therapies, and that's okay too. It's anything to kind of get you through that difficult period. And you know what, more of us are kind of there than not. So I think just taking comfort in that.
Yeah, I think it can seem quite overwhelming, can't it, to go and to almost reveal yourself in that way, to confront the feelings that you don't want to be having. But ultimately, I mean, all doctors have seen everything, you've seen and heard everything, and you're never going to be shocked and you're never going to judge. And you are in the position to help. And I think it's about parents letting that happen, letting that, know that whatever you're feeling, it's not going to last forever.
And sometimes people feel that they can't talk. I had this beautiful case actually just a few weeks ago, and it was a telephone consultation. And I kind of realised quickly that we needed to kind of bring her down to the surgery. And she was like, I'm not very good at talking. And I was like, can you write it down? And she wrote down, and it was 3 pages, and it was everything that she felt. And I read it, and it was so moving, but it was enough. It was enough of a step for us to then take it forward. And I think that it's important to know that you can do these other things. You can write lists, you can make notes, you can have a partner or a friend call up on your behalf and speak to us. And if you've given permission for that, there's lots of different ways that you can communicate that you're perhaps not doing so well, and we can take it from there and then scoop you up and do everything that we need to help.
Yeah.
Always remember that never wasting our time. And I know so many mums keep calling me and messaging me saying, oh, but I don't want to take my child into A&E because I'm just going to waste somebody's time. And no, you're not. If you're worried, if that mum instinct is saying to you that, something's just not quite right here, a GP will happily see you. And if you think it's really bad, a pediatrician in A&E will want to see you. And even if not much comes out of it, it's to get that reassurance and that confidence, and to just know that your child is okay, and like we want to see you, basically.
Yeah, I think also we're focusing a lot on mental health here, which again is hugely important. I feel like I'm saying everything is important, but it is. But also if we think about physical symptoms, because that's another side of things, postnatally, and even just as women, that we won't be willing to put ourselves forward and go and seek help for it, because so many symptoms are just seen as, well, that's what happens when you have a baby, that's kind of part and parcel of it. But again, knowing, I think maybe part of it is education as well. But again, if something doesn't feel right, whether that's from a mental health aspect or a physical health aspect, like please just go and speak to your GP as well, because not many women know that there are lots of things that can be done for them as well.
So in terms of the burnout, my takeaway is that we have to be trying as much as possible to find pockets where we give ourselves that little bit of self-compassion, self-love. We need to be making sure that we take a bit of time to be aware of how we're feeling, and know that we can ask for help or reach out, whether that is to a friend, a family member, or a doctor. It's important to just vocalize how we are feeling.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining me. This has been so lovely. Shruti lives across the road from me. We probably could wave to each other.
I've been desperately trying to find her on the streets, looking for everywhere. On those many runs, she keeps talking about.
She doesn't run. You're going to find me walking one day. I'm going to be, Shruti!
She'll be like, I'm watching you for your self-care.
Thank you so much. I know this is such a huge topic, and I feel like it's one we have to keep going on about, because I think self-love, self-compassion, it's been talked about so often, and I think right now it is needed more than ever. Huge thanks to Disney Plus for helping us bring you the Happy Mum, Happy Baby virtual meetup. And if you like this, then there are so many more videos for you to watch and enjoy. Just head to happymumhappybaby.com to find out more. Enjoy!